Ready.
All right, folks, we have the end of the Absalom saga today. I don't know about you all, but once again, this is one where I think a map is helpful. It turns out maps of David fleeing from Saul are a lot easier to find than maps fleeing from Absalom. So I have exactly one map where they chart out this progress because it helped me put a few things in context. So
Ah,
before we jump into the text, let's look at a map or two first.
good, good.
So here is the singular map.
Huh.
What and we can track the movement of the story from here. So Jerusalem is where David has set up his capital.
Hmm.
Um, if you remember a few weeks back, Absalom was kind of banished for a while. He was brought back in, and then he makes a trip to Hebron, which is south of Jerusalem, which is where Abraham is buried. And this is where
Oh.
he amasses his army and then marches on Jerusalem. So from this angle, David could see it coming, which is why he flees west or north and west. He crosses the Jordan River and then makes his way north. So the place where he ends up is actually pretty far away up north. We are not given the route that Absalom's army takes place, but it looks like the assumption is that they may have forded or crossed the river a little farther up. There's a few designated places where it's easy to cross the Jordan River, so it would make sense to go north and not follow the exact trajectory of David because you don't just want to be on his heels.
Okay,
So
let me ask. This is after he was allowed back in. He does this. I was
Uh,
having trouble following his
who is this?
Absalom. Did he do this after he was allowed back?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Why?
Absalom
Yeah.
is banished, then
He's
he is
allowed back and
forgiven by the king, and then he has a few years where he amasses social power, and then he has basically this military coup
okay. I couldn't figure out why he did that.
because he wanted power.
Oh, okay.
He didn't think David was doing a good job, or he just wanted his royal inheritance a little bit sooner than it was coming.
And that's when he starts
Hmm.
undermining.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So by the end today, there will be a fight up here in the forest of Ephraim, and then there's a time where David is once again is talking to people before crossing back over the river and going back to Jerusalem.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, okay.
the thing that will put this in, uh, I need to switch real quick to my other map to help give context to one other thing. So, this is the 12 tribes as they are classically laid out. Judah kind of eats up Simeon, and this all bottom section becomes Judah. This is a big tribe and kind of is a tribe unto itself. Like this area is semi-autonomous, where the northern 10 tribes are a unit. They are more of a stronger confederation. And we already have seen somewhat of the conflict between the northern 10 tribes and Judah and Simeon. Like when King Saul was killed in battle, Judah automatically crowned David king, and then Israel, which is the name for the northern 10 tribes in these texts, first anointed uh Mephibosheth, but eventually swore loyalty to David. So if you remember, Israel, the northern 10 tribes were slow to anoint David king. Why this is important is because um, Jerusalem is in Judah, but where David flees to is in Israel, northern 10 tribes. Gretchen, I saw a hand.
Yeah, my thought was that this sort of uh, is a preview of what is going to happen with the division of Israel from Judah.
Correct.
And it appears also that this was more long-standing than you might think when you read that section. That
Yes.
this was a long-term kind of
Mhm.
thing with the northern tribes and the southern tribes.
Yeah, there are some scholars who actually would put out there that a unified Israel that is the 12 tribes
Mhm.
never really existed.
Yeah.
That itself is Davidic propaganda,
Mhm.
and that these two regions were all always culturally distinct.
Oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna so I can actually see you all. Why they put that out there that these two regions were in fact two different regions and never really one country. The argument goes like this, that first of all, you really only have three kings that ruled over both sections. But those kings were from, or they're from Benjamin, which is in that like in between area that often gets subsumed into Judah.
Mhm.
And so because the northern 10 tribes get taken out by the Assyrians, not the Babylonians, but the Assyrians beforehand, what is left is the Judah narrative that this was one continuous kingdom. Whereas the northern 10 tribes may have a different narrative that was lost because they were conquered first. Saul's original capital is in that northern 10 tribes, which is why they have a different worshiping location. That will very quickly, when the kingdom separates, they will have two different worshiping spots. And so the thought is it was actually David's propaganda from Jerusalem that talked about this region as an entire region, but these were likely always two distinct spaces that were similar enough, but um, in the same way that Ohio, I keep bringing this up, it's a metaphor that kind of works. Ohio and Michigan are very similar in some ways and very distinct in other ways. We are more similar to each other than we are to like New York. And yet Michigan and Ohio are kind of at or have a sibling rivalry. So that's kind of the understanding with the 12 tribes is they kind of understand that they are one family, but the northern 10 tribes have a different personality than the southern ones. And so today, why I bring this up is when we're reading this text, it became very apparent very quickly when the text is saying Israel and Israelite, they are not talking about the entire region. They are only talking about the north. They will say Judah when they mean the south half and Israel when they mean the northern half.
more like that. It was not an 8.
And I think our modern understanding, especially since we currently have a nation of Israel that is the entire region, we don't always hear these as two separate places. So that will be important for the second half of our study. But first, we need to actually jump in and talk about the battle. So we've been leading up to this. Absalom has been taking power, and today the battle begins. And the first thing is that we get in chapter 18 is David strategizing about what he is going to do. And his first instinct is, I'm going to battle with you all. And Joab says, don't do that. So what do you think of this argument back and forth? What's going on here with David wanting to go into battle and his generals and officers saying, no, you stay behind? What are you hearing in this argument?
One might surmise that was it Joab that told him to stay behind?
Mhm.
You know, that Joab says, I don't want the king out there when I'm running the battle. You know, I don't want him looking over my shoulder, seeing what I'm going to do. So he
Mhm.
better stay back behind.
So why would Joab not want David being close at hand?
Well, he's about to stick a bunch of spears in Absalom, so
Yeah,
he doesn't want his father around when he does that.
Is this part of the cover up that David never does anything wrong, like kill his own son?
Yes, I think there is a strong thread of, once again, the narrator wants David nowhere close to where murder is taking place.
Okay.
So yes, that's a great observation, is once again, David is not where the action is, so David can't be held responsible.
Okay.
Yeah, Gretchen?
Is there any implication that David is no longer that capable?
That he is a liability?
Mhm. Well, they say he is a liability because if the king is there, then, everybody. But I just wonder, like, well, he's not quite what he used to be as far as I like the Joab story, but I just wonder if there's a little sense of he's getting past his prime.
Seeing that Absalom is in his prime, I think there might be a strong sense of that. There's another piece to that, though, of why, if David is past his prime, why would David want to go out to battle?
Yeah.
To show that he wasn't past his prime.
So you could have a prideful interpretation. Old man living, reliving the past, not realizing that he is no longer the warrior he once was. There's another interpretation that one could. Yeah, Gary?
Well, you used the word that he would be a liability, and I think that is true because you're going to battle. You want to address your enemy as the first concern and not protecting the king.
Hmm.
What if that's David's point in wanting to go to battle?
I thought he wanted to look like a hero, but
So David does very much have a hero complex.
but I thought he was also concerned about protecting his son. But I don't know if he really is or not, if that's just a story.
So this is one where David's reaction gives us a little bit of a clue to what's going on in David's head.
Okay.
We'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
But I'm going to throw out there as like the possibilities of what is going on here. Once again, we can fill in the gaps because the details aren't given. What if David intended to go to battle because he knew he would lose?
He was what?
Because David knew he would lose.
Oh.
Hold that in your thoughts, that this may have been a way for David to die with dignity, to die a warrior's death.
Oh, that's.
Hold that in your thoughts. So the possibilities we have of what's in the argument here, just to refresh, David could be a liability, or a hero trying to play the hero, trying to be who he was, and his officers are saying, no, don't do that. We have it covered. It could be David being mad and just like not thinking straight. It could be what was some of the other ones? Anyways, David could be going out to have a glorious death. And there's some other things that could be baked in. So the order that he gives, though, he decides, yes, he's going to stay behind. Oh, yeah, Clay?
My book tells me to refer to chapter 21, verse 17, where it says, David's men adjured him, you shall no more go out with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel. So whatever that meant to everybody.
Ooh.
Quench the lamp of Israel. So it's one of those, if the king falls, will the nation fall? So basically they've already had one king killed in battle. The military's probably not excited to have another king killed in battle. Especially when succession seems to be a little bit messy here. So there's a sense of protect the king. He no longer has to be that warrior on the battlefront. He has a military that's good enough that can handle this without him. Oh, and the last thing is get David away from culpability of killing his son. That was the other one I was missing. Anyways, Gretchen?
In verse 8, the battle spread over the face of all the country, and the forest claimed more victims that day than the sword. What does that mean?
What's that?
He took off.
So, what image does that bring to mind, first of all? Because, like, what's the mental image that you all think of when you hear that?
Well,
Desertion.
Say that again, Gary?
A number of the troops deserted. They just gave up the fight and disappeared into the woods.
That is a possibility. Other thoughts?
Well, that the terrain was so bad that it killed some of the troops.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I get the picture of Absalom because I've
Mm-hmm.
read ahead. I mean, we all have, thinking that the forest there's people going through there all the time and getting their heads caught in trees.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Yeah.
So the first thing that came to mind for me, when it seems like there are natural forces in battle, it's often a sense that God is on the battlefield. And so my first instinct was, is this a symbol that God is fighting? And the commentators don't seem to back that up. It doesn't seem like the Lord, because we've often seen in battle scenes where it's like the Lord came and caused confusion on the battlefield, or like there was a wind or there was earthquakes. Normally those natural forces are a sign that God's at work. But we haven't seen God be in a forest yet. So what this seems to imply in the commentary I was reading is it is actually describing the type of warfare that is going on. So to do this, back up and let's explain what Absalom's army looks like. He grabbed a few advisors, he conscripted people into meeting up first at Hebron and then marching on Israel or onto Jerusalem. His army is trained in a very traditional way. Think of like lining up on two sides of a field. You have your weapons, they have their weapons, and they charge at each other and then they fight. When you have conscriptions, when you like have told people to come, often what happens is you get peasants who take the farming implement off and you can stick a spearhead onto the same stick and then you have a bunch of peasants with spears. And that's what conscription looks like. And it works best when your peasants are able to face off the other people's peasants and they just run at each other and you are in the open field. David, if nothing else, is a strategist. And this is where David always seems to win, is his strategy. So he has gotten out of the mountainous regions. He is no longer in areas where there's an open battlefield, where there's a plain. He is in a forest, and David has less men, but they are more skilled men. His band of mercenaries is still around him. This is a hint that his people are trained in guerrilla warfare. So they are hiding in the woods, and the band of peasants with their sticks has a harder time to deal with trained, skilled, lifelong warriors hiding in the woods. So this is in, like, if you think about how the US won the revolution, the US sucked when we stood up side by, like, across the field from the British and went at each other. The US won because we hid in the trees.
Yeah.
Same thing happened in Vietnam. Vietnam was really a very difficult war because they were very good at hiding in the forest. This is the same type of warfare where Absalom's armies was not prepared for military men hiding in trees. Clay, I started to see a hand. Was that a question?
No, I was going to say that one of the rules of successful warfare is always defend the high ground. And of course, the forested areas are more likely to be hilly and so forth, necessarily than the plains. So controlling the high ground is important.
So that said, like, I don't doubt that there is a sense where if you're in the forest, there are animals.
Right.
There is rough terrain. Like, there is also a sense that if you're just hiking through woods trying to get at where the enemy is, you can break an ankle and then you're down for the count. Like, the forest is a very treacherous place to have a battle. And that's where David's people, they chose the battle location and they chose forest. I think this also gives us a clue of what's going on with Absalom. And if you remember his initial description, he has these lovely hair that people pay money for. And so he is riding a mule, which my notes are saying was the traditional mount for kings. Horses are extremely expensive, so it kind of shows that, like, a mule is a fancy animal because it's not a donkey.
Okay.
So this is just kind of showing that Israel is not Egypt, because Egypt has horses. Israel has mules, but this is the royal mount, and he's like riding along in the woods, and he gets snagged by his hair. And I love the image of this is so, for once, descriptive. He gets caught up in his hair, and his mule keeps riding without him. Oh, so there's a lot of symbolism because he's evidently very proud of his hair, and his hair is very luscious, his source of his pride, and yet it is the thing that catches him and gets him stuck in a tree. What do you all think of this image here? Is it just poetic justice or humor?
Yeah.
There's a part of me that was kind of like puzzled that it said his head caught fast in the oak and he was left hanging between heaven and earth. And I always pictured it, his hair was just all over the place. So when his head, I was like, ugh, caught in the crook of a tree. I don't know.
The implication is that it is his hair.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
That all the commentaries are saying, like, what's gonna hold fast? It's he gets caught in it with his hair.
Yeah.
You know, this reads like a novel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing to me that it's written like this. It's just
Yeah, a teenage novel.
yeah, I don't yeah.
It's very picturesque, isn't it? Very visual.
Yeah.
And why?
Why this one?
Yeah, I mean, why this kind of a visual image? Is it to say Absalom got what he deserved because of his pride, because of his appearance? I don't know. I think it's a real interesting thing that right in the middle of this, you have this story that it's not what you do in Sunday school, but it's worth a Sunday school lesson. I mean, it's not. It's just so. Oh, there it is. He's
Yeah.
writing.
Well, you know, what I was wondering is that Absalom, in some ways, isn't there a hymn with him, or a spiritual, or Absalom?
Absalom, oh Absalom. It's
Yes.
his lament.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
We'll get to that in a
Why
moment.
would that be?
You know, the way this emphasizes the power of the woods and the fact that David chose that to be the place.
Mhm.
Right,
Mhm.
Right.
right, okay.
So narratively, why is it important that Absalom is done in by, in some ways, completely random forces?
Yeah, he'd still be alive if he hadn't caught his hair in the tree,
Yeah.
even though it was Joab that stuck 3 spears in his heart. You know, I mean, there's no question Joab wanted him dead.
Yes. So there's a really strong metaphor that's kind of, I think that's why this story is preserved in the detail that it is because the metaphor is too good it writes itself.
Mhm.
Absalom is caught up, is done,
Caught up.
done
Caught
in,
up.
I know, caught up. His downfall is his pride.
Mhm.
It's one of those things where Absalom was going to inherit the throne. He was next in line. He was forgiven. He was brought into court. He had everything. He wanted it sooner. And so his pride set up this situation. And evidently his hair is his symbol of his pride. And
Mhm.
so by having your hair just be snagged by a tree makes me think that it's not like pulled back. Because if you have like, if he evidently has long flowing locks, I'm getting ready for battle, I would want to secure my hair so it's not loose and flowing, so a tree won't be able, like if a tree catches my hair right now, I'm just going to be able to like pull it out. Which is like, did he get fancy for battle? Did he do his hair in an elaborate look for battle because he's prideful?
Huh.
And so he would have inherited the kingdom if he left well enough alone, but not only did he cause the attack, his prideful persona is what got him caught in a tree.
Mhm.
And mind you, also, his initial advice was, don't you just stay home. We will take David's army out at night.
Yes.
And the other advice he got was like, no, 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 go to battle. Face David yourself. And that's the advice that he took. And David does the opposite thing. David's willing to let his men do his work. David is humble enough to trust his military leaders to make the choices, where Absalom was convinced by the advice that he needed to be there himself. Absalom is making all of the decisions that inflate his ego, and now he's caught in a tree. So that's where like there's this metaphor of like Absalom is prideful all the way, and it is his downfall.
Oh, yeah.
So the first person to come upon him is just a soldier, and he like runs to Joab saying, "Hey, I just saw Absalom." And Joab is like, "Why didn't you kill him?" And the soldier's response is, "I would not dare. Did you not hear the king
Yeah.
saying to be gentle to his son?" So it sounds like the troops understood what David was saying.
Mhm.
And Joab had other plans
Mhm.
and is willing to do it, or willing to kill the king's son, even though the king said not to.
But did David really mean not to?
Why do you say that?
Well, I'm not sure that I don't know that he really trusted Absalom at all. I mean, Absalom had not behaved very well. And he'd
No.
given him a chance. I just wonder if that saying that was to also make him look good. Oh, don't hurt him.
Mhm.
I would never hurt anybody. I'm a nice king.
So
I-
why is it so why then is Joab seems to have other ideas. So do you think your accusation seems to be that David said this to the people, don't be nice to him, and then he told Joab, kill him. So we have the public relations, be kind to my son, be gentle, and then cutthroat behind the back is what you seem to think, Gretchen?
Yeah, there's a part of that Uriah the Hittite returns again,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, just put him in battle. He'll do
Mhm.
fine. I don't know.
Other thoughts? Is there another way to read this?
I got the idea that maybe he just didn't want his son to suffer. If he's
Mm-hmm.
you're successful, give him a quick out.
So that was less of a don't kill him and more of a don't torture him.
Right. Just don't make an issue. Just let him, because there was some wording somewhere that kind of implied that, but
Okay.
Well, if it was an act, he kind of overplayed it. It seems it made everybody feel really bad.
So yeah, David's response is what gives me pause on this one. There's a few different things that we can read into, but the other thing to consider is if Joab in some ways thinks he knows better than the king because it's like, hey, this guy just tried to overthrow the king. I don't want to do this again. I am taking out the possibility of revolt once again. And so Joab is just like, I am willing to take responsibility for this man's death. I am going to kill him. Because Joab is the one who then takes a spear and actually,
kills him.
well, the rest of the army then attacks him, but Joab does deal the the blow that would eventually have caused him to die if the other people did nothing. And so there's a sense where Joab is willing to take responsibility on this one, where he's like, even I don't care what the king wants. The king will be better off if this man is dead.
Yeah, Joab's initial response when the soldier comes up and says he saw Absalom with his hair caught in a tree is, why didn't you kill him? And he immediately grabs 3 spears and runs out there and throws 3 spears in Absalom's heart. Which clearly should have done him in regardless, but then it gets spread out because then a bunch of other soldiers come and they all take a turn at hacking at him, I guess.
Kind of like Murder on the Orient Express, isn't it?
So then we have this interesting exchange where there is a long discussion between Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, which is one of the priests. So Ahimaaz says, let me go tell the king. And Joab is like, no, 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 no. You are not going. Why does Joab not want this kid to go? Why would Joab be wanting for the Cushite? Cush is below Egypt, so it is either in like Namibia, Ethiopia region. And so it's a foreigner, and he's like, I'm gonna send the foreigner to go tell the king his son is dead.
It doesn't work for anybody to tell David that somebody has just been killed because they automatically get killed right after they make the pronouncement. David will turn on him.
Where have we seen this before where David does not respond well to the news?
Hmm.
When
what is it? Let's
when
see.
the warrior came back and with about Saul after killing Saul.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
good
the
one.
warrior was
Oh, yeah.
really excited. He's like, "Hey, here's the things. I'm proving to you your enemy is dead." And David is not happy. And yeah, lops his head off almost right on the spot. There's another situation where, oh, I forget where it is. There's another time where someone comes and tells David, "Hey, this person's dead. Aren't you happy?" David kills that person too.
Yeah, I can't remember. Wasn't Amnon, was it? Well, anyway, it's better to have an enemy go tell. Oh, was it Uriah?
I'm
The
forgetting.
Hittite?
There is a second time.
Hmm.
Anyways, yeah, so David has now done this twice where someone goes to him thinking they're telling good news, and David is of the opposite opinion.
Mhm.
And so Joab knows enough to say, okay, no, 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 no. Important kid, you are not going to tell David. You are way too excited. That's not going to go well.
Mhm.
And what is this little interlude back there with the just, well, completely covering up Absalom's, and then talking about Absalom had built a monument for himself. What is that related to? What is that gonna
So
prove?
it shows two things.
Mhm.
So first of all, so they throw him into a big heap in a pile so he doesn't get an honorable burial.
Okay.
But then there's this other interlude, and it kind of has like a small flashback of Absalom building a pillar. And this is one of those, we got this a lot more in Genesis, where there's an explanation of a landmark. So this is partially an explanation of a landmark that is still called to this day Absalom's monument. What they seem to want to distinguish is this is not his grave. They seem to want to clarify that, oh, this is a monument. Absalom is not there. Absalom is buried in an unmarked grave. This was Absalom lamenting that he never had a son. And not having a son is important because that means Absalom has no heirs and there is no one to avenge his father. So Absalom's line is gone.
Thank you.
And so the standing stone in a way is the way you carry on your legacy is your heirs, the male lineage. And so Absalom basically sets up a stone so you don't forget him because he has no male heirs. But it is clarifying because I throw a bunch of rocks on him. The pillar that is set up is not the grave.
Mhm. Okay.
At any rate, going back, so the Cushite is sent with the actual news. The young guy who's very excited doesn't know the full story. He just knows, hey, we won. And so we get this scene where David is standing, and from a long ways off, they can see it. And he's telling his person, like, how many people are running? There's one person running alone. And if he is alone, there are tidings in his mouth. The other person brings tidings. The assumption is they're bringing good news. And so we are told though that Ahimaaz is the one who gets there first and greets the king excitedly, saying good news. But David asks, like, hey, how is my son? Like, what's going on with him? He doesn't know, so he kind of steps aside and he gets a pass. Even though he arrived first, he is not killed. The Cushite comes, you are vindicated. once again, tell me about my son. And he doesn't outright say that Absalom is dead, but basically, may all of your enemies be dead like this one. So indicating that he is dead. But David doesn't kill the Cushite. Knowing what David's done before, what are some of the implications that we could find that David doesn't seems to be more upset about the death of Saul than the death of his son here? Is he just old and weary? Did that secret pact with Joab happen where he's like, yeah, no, we need to do away with this kid? What do you infer by the fact that David doesn't just like automatically like, why are you telling me this like it's good news? This is terrible news. Like he doesn't have that same reaction that we've seen before.
The end of 18.
Huh? Maybe David is more fearful of an inside job as far as Absalom's death is concerned. The fact that this foreigner comes and tells him sort of implies, well, you know, outside people really didn't have anything to do with this death. It must have happened somehow internally. That might have been David's thought, or at least concern.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. Yeah, you don't get why this guy gets by with it, with telling David such bad news.
Mm-hmm.
It turns around though that really David carries on a lot.
Mm-hmm. It makes me wonder if sometimes when people experience tragedy after tragedy, they kind of break down into, or like they become just a sorrowful person who never quite moves beyond grief. And there's other people who become calloused to it. And part of me wonders if David has a sense of callousness to, like, there is a sense of grief still, but if David has already lost so much that it just doesn't sting in the same way.
Which makes the mourning for Absalom seem fake, almost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very typical movement for David to mourn people who are, oh, my son Amnon, oh, I mean, like, okay, give me a break. You didn't like him when he was alive, and now here you go, and on and on. And you know, he did that with Saul. Oh, Saul, you were so wonderful. What an actor. Sorry, Larry, but
No, he is. He is.
He's also more mature at this point. And like Chris says, he's been through a lot. And what's the point of vengeance of killing the messenger? I think he's just matured past that point. And after all, they set out to war to kill. So again, I think it's maybe maturity. He's had a lot of experience.
But then his response at the very end of this chapter is, my son Absalom, would I have died instead of you, O Absalom, my son?
Yeah.
Which that is well, he doesn't annihilate the messenger here. It still has such a sorrowful tone where that's why this is the phrase where I'm like, did David want to go out almost in a blaze of glory and in a way hand his kingdom to his son? That it's like, oh, I think there's a strong argument for both cases of this is performative. he told Joab to kill his son. He knew what had to be done, and he's kind of that calloused king, and he's like, this is performance. But there's also a sense that David's grief bleeds through, and I wonder if he is a depressed old king who kind of knew it was time and was willing to go out, because I mean that's what Saul and Jonathan did. Saul and Jonathan died on the battlefield, and if he was like, I am a warrior, I should have had that honorable death, not in my bed, but on the battlefield. I could have gone out like that, and then my son would still be alive. I think there's a case for both of those arguments, and we don't actually know. There's not enough contextual clues, and our text likes to smooth out some of David's intentions. But then the next chapter is David's return, and there's some interesting tidbits that we're gleaning along the way with David's return back. So the king is grieving his son. He covers his face and he cries. And Joab makes it back and scolds the king.
Saying, yeah.
Like, you just had a lot of men go to battle and die for you, and now you're weeping because you won? And there's a sense where good on Joab for being willing to scold the king. So what do you think of this argument? Is he invalidating David's grief over his treacherous son? Or is this kind of the whipping into shape that the king needs to do his duty?
Well, Joab certainly thought Absalom should have been killed. I mean, because he did it, and then to go back and in essence tell his father, look, Absalom was trying to kill you, and here all these generals went out and fought for you and protected you, and now you're crying because the guy that was going to kill you is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also it's really kind of, I don't think it's a very good scene to see the king crying.
Mm-hmm.
And Joab probably thought, this is not good for morale in general.
So one clarification, Joab isn't David's son, it's his nephew.
Right.
I just had to relook that up just to remember. So this is David's sister's son.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but I think he's aware of this trait of his uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He kind of, he I don't want to say relishes in, but the grieving process, he seems to go to extremes. And in his position, that's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clay?
Yeah, I was just going to say it would take a family member to be able to speak to the king like this. Almost like a parent, almost it brings to mind that, hey, if all your friends jumped off the cliff, would you also jump? It's that kind of hyperbole. If Absalom were alive and everyone else had been killed, that kind of an example, it's pretty harsh. And I think only a family member like that could speak to him and then say, now, stop it, get up and go out and do what you're supposed to do as king. So it's an interesting group of verses there.
Yeah. But I think Joab's critique is on the nose of like, there's a lot of people who just sacrificed a lot for you, uncle.
Yeah.
Don't you can be sad, but don't disrespect the men.
Right. And that's he uses that, hyperbole type example that says exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Because the other thing that's in danger here is if David shows weakness, he is liable for someone else to rise up and usurp the throne. That it's like, if you don't step up, this is about to happen again, and you will lose, and all of this will be for nothing. Come on. Like, you need to show strength right now and gratitude for the people who just did a lot for you.
Yeah, and if you don't, they're not going to stay with you. You will be alone tonight. I mean, it's really quite realistic and harsh and almost over the top.
And so David does get up and he takes his seat at the gate. This is a very specific image here that I had to look up to see what was going on here. Sitting at the gate of a city was where the judges of old were, and that's where the seat of power is. So that's where business dealings were done. So by sitting at the gate, he is establishing his sovereignty once again. It's a symbolic thing to say, I am the ruler. Once again, he sits at the gate and judges as king. Mind you, though, this is in the northern area. This is in Israel that he sits at the gate and kind of reestablishes himself as ruler over the region. So we have, meanwhile, all of Israel fled to their homes. So this is, once again, Israel and Judah are two separate entities here. So this is talking about the northern 10. The people go to their homes and they are like, well, David delivered us from enemies once again. We did do the thing with Absalom, but Absalom's dead, so yeah, let's accept David back as king. And there's this conversation, so the Northern Kingdom accepts David back first. But then David sends challengers to Judah into Jerusalem saying, hey, these guys up here accepted me as king. I'm from you people. Like, why have you done nothing? These conversations imply that some time has elapsed, and David doesn't feel safe going back to the city until he is welcomed back. He doesn't want to walk into an ambush. And so he is waiting for an invitation to return to his house. And David basically sends a messenger saying, hey, the Northern Kingdom is willing to accept me. What's going on with you all? And so this is where we see some of those divisions, that underlying division between these two regions start to play out. Yeah.
I thought this whole section from where it starts with David's mercy to Shimei, the whole thing to the end was just, I found it boring.
It is kind of
unimportant, kind of like, who cares about I was interested to see Mephibosheth come back again, but the others was like,
So we have a few curious details here. I'll try to hit the details of the important bits because, yeah, it's kind of dull. It's falling action, just getting David back to the throne. The first is, if you look at verse 13, David talks to Amasa. Thank you. Are you not bone of my bone? Are you not my bone and my flesh? So may God do to you and more if you are not the commander of my army from now on in place of Joab. So he demotes Joab. He doesn't kill Joab, but he does demote him, which is another sense where I don't think those two were in cahoots because we see this demotion, but it's a political move to get Judah back on his side. And so there's that one bit of politicking where he brings Judah back on board by demoting the guy who killed his son. And then we have Shemi who comes and he's like the first in the line right as David's about to cross back over the river. There's a welcoming party basically at the Jordan River. And this guy is first. And I had to go back and look who this guy was. Do any of you remember who this dude was?
I didn't remember.
Okay. If you remember when David was leaving, there was a guy throwing stones and cursing him, and it's like, this is what you get for killing King Saul. Curse you, and doing all of this. And David's like, let him live. This is that guy. And so he like runs back when all of a sudden the challenger is dead and David's king. And he's like, please don't kill me, king. I'm sorry. I was wrong. And David gives him mercy. That's why that's interesting. He will come back up one more time, but he cursed the king and David decided to be merciful to this guy. Basically like nothing happened to me, so evidently your curses are pretty weak. And then David meets Mephibosheth once again because we were told he stayed behind because he wanted to be king, and Mephibosheth was like, I told my servant to get my donkey ready, and then he left. And so he claims that he actually wanted to leave with David. He just couldn't because he was crippled. And his image is supposed to show that, whether it is acting or not. It's like he didn't shave, his clothes aren't washed, and there's something going on with his feet that he hasn't done what he needs to make his feet presentable. So he is coming very disheveled, saying he was not having a good time. And so is very happy for David to be back. And then we have one more kindness. Brasilia? Oh, Barzil.
I say,
huh?
Brazilla.
Yeah. This old man was the one who came to David when he was first hiding out, and he brought him food. So this elderly gentleman, it says he's in his 80s, he gave David and his troops food. And David's offer is, you fed me in the wilderness. Do you want to join me in court? I'm willing to feed you until you die. And the old man basically says, I'm too old to enjoy life at court. I just want to live peacefully and die. And so he like gratefully declines his invitation, but he sends someone else in his place. It's assumed to be his son. He like sends his son to be a person at David's court. So this is all falling action just to show what happened on the way home. And then lastly, the last little bit is just a skirmish between Israel and Judah. Basically, each one is accusing the other of holding the king for too long. So we still see the tension between these two groups. And they're not exactly happy with each other and questioning each other's loyalty. So that was a speed run to the end. Any final thoughts about this Absalom arc up and down? We're about at time here. Any final thoughts with all of this?
Well, do you think that David's loud lamentation over Absalom is acting, or is it real?
Oh, Sue, you ask a question and we can return to it here. Is David's lamentation of, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. I don't know it for a fact, but I wouldn't doubt if that was turned into a hymn, because a lot of things like this are. And what is interesting is this mourning over someone who was a terrible person. Like, Absalom was not a good human being. Yes, he avenged his sister, but it doesn't seem like he did. There could be ulterior motives there. But have you all seen this where someone laments for someone who in their life did not behave well, who was not a nice or a kind person? And what do you make of of someone who laments the life of someone who wasn't good.
Well, maybe it's maybe it's also to say to not acknowledge how bad the person was to them, to just keep that kind of hidden in their own psyche, that, I loved him, but you really didn't. But you can't come to terms with that. You can't come to terms. You don't speak ill of the dead. I mean, we hear that all the time.
And certainly in people in high places, we often overlook things that would be considered serious discretions in any ordinary person's life, but sort of get swept under the carpet in view of the fact of all the good that the individual may have done with his life. Sort of it's an excuse. Boys will be boys.
Yes.
Could this not also be one of Chris's favorites? Is a little bit more propaganda to build the character that here he has great sympathy for his enemy.
Yep. Could be. Yeah, Clay?
Well, is there any correlation between wanting him to not be harmed during the battle? In other words, don't harm my son, and yet he's brutally killed. Is that why he's lamenting so much? Because it just didn't work out? Did he have other plans for what he wanted to do with Absalom? I mean, I'm just wondering, you're lamenting, but you had also said, don't kill don't hurt my son in this battle. And then he is brutally hurt. And now he is really, could he be really grieving?
So there's some possibilities here. And we don't have enough detail to know where it is, but sometimes there is a sense of don't speak ill of the dead. And it's always interesting at funerals where that the person being memorialized was not a good person, and yet glowing things are being said. And I have always felt weird in those situations where that this is not truthful.
Right.
In a similar way, I have seen it where when someone is gone, the bad things, people are willing to kind of just ignore that they ever happened. And there's that almost intentional forgetting of the bad, which can also take place, which also to me feels really strange when someone's image is kind of whitewashed in memory. There could be a sense that David is lamenting that he was a bad parent. Because David was a bad parent.
Yeah.
There could be a sense of Absalom, I failed you. I failed you, Absalom. Almost I'm sorry. This should not have gone this way. You're bad in some ways because that's my fault.
He had too many kids. How could he be a good parent to 12 sons? To say nothing of his daughters.
Well, there's a sense if he had actually punished his eldest son, would Absalom still be alive? Because then Absalom wouldn't have had this villain arc. But then the last one that I could also see, which I've seen sometimes when people are grieving objectively bad people, is there's this opportunity for reconciliation has now been ripped away. David had just reconciled with Absalom when he does this whole thing. And there's a sense of he's dead, which means everything is done. The relationship is over. We can't reconcile. I can't ask for forgiveness. He can't ask for forgiveness. If he was alive and in jail, maybe we could have repaired something, but there's no chance for repair anymore. It's done. It's just done. And there's almost a rawness when even the chance to reconcile with I've seen people lament when like their abuser dies. And there's almost a sense of sadness because they can never admit that they had done wrong. There's not even a possibility of a sorry. There's no chance of a reconciliation moment. Even though the chance of that was very low, now the chance is 0.
Mhm.
Or, once again, it could be propaganda. I have no doubt. You all know my favorite argument is a lot of this book is just David's propaganda. So, like, any of these are an option of what's going on. I think these are complicated emotions that David is feeling, though.
Mm.
So,
Well, if you did with that last one, like, David is finally feeling remorse for how he's raised a child, you could use it in preaching. I mean, really, it's a bad example, but
but
go with it.
I still think it is important, though, to consider how we grieve people who behaved badly in life.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
it is.
like, it is interesting when major figures pass away and their image upon death is kind of smoothed over.
Mm.
Mhm.
And and that weird feeling that we have reading this text of the like, why? I do think people have, and it's worth acknowledging the good and the bad, because otherwise you're left with this kind of funny feeling.
I would agree with David or with Larry about being at a funeral that is like there's no truth in this. This is I don't that just doesn't it's all a lie then. I mean, even I find that really disturbing. But well, if you couldn't face it when they were alive, you maybe can't face it. You can't face it now. Like you say, the reconciliation is over. The possibility is over, unless you go into some deep psychotherapy and journal it out and talk to your dead dad or whatever. But anyway, that goes beyond the point. It is, I think, an interesting thing that they come and they kind of they clean up Shimei.
Mhm.
They just do a few small things to, oh, things are getting along. We're getting back to normal. Things.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, we are well past time. The story continues next week. I'm going to be sending out an updated schedule. My time off shifted a little bit from my initial schedule for the summer, so I'll send you all an update. But with that, shall we pray ourselves out? All right, let us pray. Loving God, justice is always a complicated thing. It is sometimes very cathartic to cheer when the bad guys fall and when it seems like that the people who do evil in the world get their comeuppance. And yet in this story, we see that life lost is still life lost. That we can grieve those that maybe did not do right while they were alive. For God, sometimes we see what they could have been and would never be. Sometimes we lament our role in their story and wonder if we are responsible for part of the way they acted. Sometimes we lament that we can never make repairs for relationships that were broken. Help us sit with these complicated emotions and help us trust that you hold us in your hands and that our complicated emotions aren't too much for you. So guide us in our journeys, in the places that we find ourselves that are morally complicated, and help us find our way always to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Have a good week, everyone.
Stay
Aha.
cool.